Dear Amy, can you send me a list of your favorite markers? If you're brand new to alcohol markers, or you're still in the early stages of building your Copic collection, it can be very tempting to ask your favorite artist or search the internet for a recommendation list. But I've noticed a big problem with most starter lists. And today, I want to give you better beginner recommendations for green and greenish Copic markers. Before we get into the nitty-gritty green details, let me stop you from making a very logical, totally understandable mistake. We all love a bargain, and what could be easier than ordering a prepackaged box set of Copics? Well, not really. It looks like there's a slight price advantage to the large sets, but that's only if you break down the box like into this imaginary price per marker and then compare that price to the regular open stock price. But open stock Copics are always on sale somewhere, and the sale prices are usually lower, often a lot lower, than the economy set discount. So other than the premium designer decorative plastic box, there's no advantage to ordering a box set. And actually, there's a very big disadvantage. See, you assume the nice folks at Copic have spent lots of time creating an amazing collection of their very best markers. Everything you need to get started? Not even close. Box sets are not intended for beginners. They don't contain beginner blending combinations. Heck, most of them don't even contain usable blending combinations. I don't think it's a conspiracy, but I do find it odd that the box sets always have a lot of weird or rarely used colors in them. Some of these colors don't sell well individually. And remember, Copic didn't even take the time to match these weird colors with other weird colors to form usable weird blending combinations. 10 minutes after you open this box, you'll be back online shopping for more markers to go with this mess. Okay, I admit it, I'm not a big fan of the box sets, but that's only because they burned me once. I will not fall for that again. So instead, let's find out what other marker artists and influencers are using, because if we buy the colors they love most, then we can color just like them. Well, not really. See, you're a beginner and they're probably not. Beginners need beginner marker colors, and that's not a bad thing. There's a reason we put kids on little bicycles and not Apache helicopters. When you're a beginner, you don't have many marker skills. Learning is easier when you're using easy markers. It's not fair to hand you a list of deceptively difficult markers and then make you feel like a doofus for not being able to blend. Because I'm a marker instructor first and a YouTuber second, I actually put a lot of thought into my beginner marker recommendations. Here's my standard for what makes a good beginner Copic. First, I avoid staining colors for beginners. What's a staining color? Well, markers are not just different colors of the same ink. Copic makes 358 markers, and they all have unique ink formulas. Every marker has different characteristics and behaviors. Some inks are stubborn and staining. They grab onto paper fibers and refuse to blend. Until you have a lot of experience, staining markers are just hard to work with. Not just for you, but for everyone. Everyone. Not every marker is a staining color though, so when you come across one accidentally, you tend to blame yourself, like you're having a bad blending day, when it's actually the marker's fault. And folks, tough talk time here. Some of those cheaper marker brands, they're cheaper because they use inexpensive ink. The ink is inexpensive because it stains. Staining markers are hard to work with. Copic has fewer staining colors than average, but some colors like red are always more staining. And I see a lot of staining Copics on starter marker lists and in tutorials that are aimed at beginners. learning would be so much easier if people would stop encouraging you to buy staining markers. It's almost like the big influencers have forgotten how hard it is to be a beginner. Okay, so I want to make learning easier by giving you non-staining colors. I also try to recommend stable colors. I don't want you confused by colors that do funky things if you mix it with the wrong color. And that's a big factor in today's video, because greens are weird. Usefulness is my third factor. In the beginning, you don't have a lot of markers, and I'm not sure if you realized it yet, but Copics are kind of expensive. So I think it's very important that every marker you purchase is a color you're actually going to use. Not everyone needs 40 green markers. If you don't like green, you're not going to use a lot of green. Your marker collection should reflect your taste and style. And if you only color penguins and polar bears, you might not need green at all. Let's not waste your money on markers that the experts love, but you'll never use. Okay, so this video, it covers the green family. See how they all have a little G in the name? When you lay these three color families side by side, what you're seeing is a green temperature spectrum. Over here, we have the warm greens, and over here, we have the cool greens. And in between, well, okay, I want to say that this is the middle range of greens, not too warm and not too cool. But to be perfectly honest, the Copic Gs, they all lean cool too. So we have our warms, our cools, and our very, very cools. Now, I want you to remember back to my previous video where I gave you yellow recommendations. I also talked about how yellow ink is the least staining and easiest to blend of all the colors. What's the second least staining and the second easiest to blend? Blue. So what does that tell you about the three green families here? And this, my friends, greatly influences my recommendations for you today. Hello, I'd like to introduce you to Copic's most staining marker. If you accidentally bought any of these sets, you've been sabotaged by this innocent-looking green. This color is harder to blend than black. It's incredibly staining, and the cheaper the paper you use, the harder this little is to blend. But here's the thing. G28 is a total to deal with, but his hillbilly cousins here, they're not much better. If you only know me from YouTube, you may not realize that 1, I have legs, but 2, I also test the chemistry and behavior patterns of Copic markers. I do this in a series of articles that I call Copics Uncapped. In my testing, by far, the greatest number of Copics that fail my 3 beginner qualities, a lot of them come from the G marker family. So for my beginner marker list, I've taken the radical step of not recommending any G markers. I know it's crazy, but hear me out. If you've seen my work, you know I color a ton of flowers and botanicals, and I do most of it without a G marker in sight. So given that these vicious little inbred markers are hard to work with, and the fact that I don't even need half of these colors anyway, why would I recommend them to you? So this is happening. I'm making a green recommendation video without recommending any G markers. Let's talk about the greens I use most. The YG family. YG on the cap is Copic's way of telling you that this is a composite ink. There's some yellow ink in this marker, and there's some green ink. And that yellow, we've already discussed, it makes blending easier. But beyond that, and this is coming from someone who specializes in realistic food and realistic florals, the YG family contains the most organic and natural greens that Copic has to offer. That's not to say there's not the usual problems. The YG zeros are very saturated and overly bright. A few of them feel fluorescent, and honestly, these 4 here, they're the least organic colors in the whole entire YG family. And then, as we move in this direction, the colors get murkier and more complex. Some are pretty darn dirty. As you grow your Copic collection, I strongly encourage you to buy all of the YG markers before you spend a penny on anything G. But to begin with, I'm recommending that you start with a combination of YG03, YG17, and YG67. I could run classes, and actually I did run coloring classes for years with just this blending combination, plus a few blues or violets as underpaint on occasion. This is my go-to green for students at all levels, and also in my own personal work. And I've talked with a ton of other instructors who also begin their beginners with this combination. YG03 is the color of sunshine on green leaves, and this marker is a total workhorse. It will blend with anyone. YG17 is its ideal mate. With these 2 colors, you've basically got your greens covered. YG67 adds the little organic twist. It's a bit murky, and that's what makes it perfect for shade. Mwah! It's just a chef's kiss. I'll give an honorable mention to the YG90s. They come in handy for landscapes and food illustration. But they're not as universally useful as 03, 17, 67. So get the leaf YG combination first, then get the olives. Now let's talk teal, turquoise, and aquamarine. The BG collection is my favorite Copic color family. I love these markers so much, and someone once told me it's because I'm Pisces. But I just really love working with these colors. And honestly, because they're so easy to blend, I had a hard time narrowing down which ones to recommend to you. BG11 is my starting point. I cannot live without this marker. It's the perfect universal background color. It's there, but it's kind of not. It makes for a background that actually sits in the background. It's also useful for shading white objects. And I teach beginner classes with this marker all the time. Students love it, and no one ever has a problem with it. So if I'm building upon BG11, I'd combine it with BG13 and BG49. I don't love the BG zeros. No surprise there. I don't love many of the zero groups. And BG23 is just kind of sitting here by itself, so it feels kind of pointless. But on the whole, I use more BG markers than you suspect. Probably more than I use the blue markers. Pisces? I don't know. Okay. I feel bad that I didn't at least give a partial recommendation to something from the G family. I mean, I don't feel really bad. I'll sleep tonight just fine, thank you very much. But if I had to pick the best of the worst, I do use the G40 family more than any of the others. Now, I would never call this a beginner blending combination, and here's why. If you just look at the caps, this combination should work. The numbers are nicely spaced for a good gradient, and even the inks look like an easy light, medium, dark blending combination. But looks are deceiving. Look at what happens when we blend it. And this is what I mean by an unstable color. G40 has a ton of solvent in it. When it goes over the top of anything darker, it breaks that ink apart into its component colors. We call this shattering. We see hints of blue and yellow here because the G40 is breaking down the G46 to reveal its original ingredients. It's not your fault. This is just what it does. And to be fair, many markers shatter worse than the G40s. YG45 breaks apart if you even look at it wrong. The artist in me really likes these shattering effects, but you can't control them, and they're frustrating for beginners. Plus, there's something staining in this G40 group, which makes blending harder than you might expect. I've noticed quirks like this in all of the G markers. So of all the Gs, I use the G40s the most, and they're good for botanicals and they're really nice at Christmas time, but I would wait a while before investing in them. And here's one more tip for today, and this is foreshadowing what's to come in my next video, which covers blue. I want you to add BV04 to my recommended YG and even the BG combination. The darker the green marker, the more stubborn that ink is for blending. But the truth is, most of the YG, G, and BG markers that end in 9, they're not as dark as advertised. You open up the cap expecting it to be a really dark, and actually, they're not all that dark. I could never shade botanicals and greenery with realism if I didn't mix my own dark greens. This is underpainting, and it's how I mix the dark and shady green colors that Copic does not make. I use B, BV, and V markers to color blue and violet things, but then I also use them to shade underneath all of the other colors. More on that when I talk about blues and violets in the next video. So here are my beginner recommendations for yellow-green, blue-green, and green if you absolutely can't live without it. But I think you can. If you want the full marker list or more information about my Monstera project, see the resource page for this video linked down in the description. And for recommendations on red, orange, yellow, and pink, watch this video here.